In this session, I am going to review some prior year midterm exams so that you get exposure as to the expectations and how you think about these questions. This particular recording relates to midterm 1, spring 2016. And the first question it reads the following. In the article below, it is proposed to raise the Medicare age to 67. Using economic theory, discuss the implication of this legislation on the medical care services. Now, the way you approach these questions is first determine the product or service subject to analysis. So in this case, the question actually kind of guides you to think along those lines and is asking you to investigate the impact on the medical care services. This essentially means that you start off with building a market model. On the horizontal axis would be medical care services, and on vertical axis would be price of medical care services. Always the price of the same product, no other variable will go on this market model. Now, the next step is to make some assumptions about the demand and supply of medical care services. At this point, we will just make no specific assumptions about how difficult or easy it is to purchase or produce medical care services. So therefore, we'll have a generic 45-degree supply curve and a generic 45-degree demand curve. And then you establish the initial equilibrium price and quantity for medical care services. Now, if the Medicare age is increased, let's say from 65 to 67, the question is what happens to the market for medical care services? By imposing age qualification requirement into the future, essentially some people will have to wait a couple more years, and in between they have to purchase insurance or pay out of pocket. So therefore, for that segment of the population who is expected to qualify for Medicare, they will just have to postpone either care or pay out of pocket, both of which will shift the demand to the left. That much we know. The next thing is that if you have to purchase insurance on your own or pay out of pocket, that adds to your price sensitivity toward obtaining medical care in general. If you have to pay out of pocket to purchase insurance for the time being, if you're not employed somewhere with medical benefits, then you may or may not purchase the medical insurance, or you may purchase very minimal medical insurance or catastrophic medical insurance and so forth. And if you have to pay out of pocket, it obviously adds to your price sensitivity toward the services you may require. So therefore, we know that the demand will shift to the left, and to the degree that you have to kind of consider paying out of pocket, the demand curve becomes also flatter, reflecting the higher degree of price sensitivity. So the new equilibrium would be lower medical care services consumed or exchanged, and then the prices have to fall for these group of people who pay out of pocket or are not in the marketplace at the current prices. And this essentially completes the analysis. Start off with establishing the product or service in question, establishing the price for it, and then making some assumptions, and in this case on the supply and demand side, in this case we chose not to make any particular assumption. And the assumption means that do we start off with inelastic demand curve for medical care services, or do we assume that the supply is also inelastic, meaning steep. You could argue that people who are currently 65, let's say, and the assumption was that they would obtain Medicare coverage, and they will continue to be price insensitive, or the demand will be inelastic. And once the news hits that the age will be extended additional 2 years, then they become price sensitive. So you could argue or start your model making the case that the supply is what it is, and price and quantity, and the demand is currently, for those who may be eligible, will be inelastic. And then as soon as they get the news that they have to wait a couple of years longer, the demand for medical care services will shrink and become price elastic. That's the answer to question 1. So very brief, no more than a few sentences to explain your assumptions and the conclusion as to the overall impact. So you establish the initial equilibrium and then work into it what became or what is expected to become as a result of the dynamic of the question. That's question number 1. Question number 2. It reads, in the article below, CDC, Center for Disease Control, has expressed concern with overprescription of antibiotics. Using economic models, discuss the implication of overused antibiotics on medical care services. Again, we know that the question is the impact on the medical care services. This would be price of medical care services. And there is a demand for medical care services. As a whole, medical care services are one of those products that once you're in the market for it, it's not like a different variation of pizza or some other occasion and so forth. The demand as a whole is price inelastic, either because it's presence of insurance or the necessity of the product that causes people to not necessarily shop around. And then in this particular case, we're going to not make any particular assumption about the supply. Let's say the supply is generic. Now, if one product, in this case antibiotics, are over-applied, misused, misapplied, this can have adverse effects on the delivery of the medical care, meaning that the services provided will become problematic and has issues associated with it. So therefore, misapplication of any input, just the same way that you hire someone and just kind of mess up what he or she's supposed to do, you kind of put him in a wrong position, or you buy a piece of equipment that it turned out to be a terrible idea and it actually adds to your headache, etc. And so anytime you use resources inappropriately, ineffectively, causing more problem than before, it affects the production of medical care, production of whatever it is that you produce, and so that causes the supply curve to shift to the left, and because you're causing complications, the supply becomes actually reflecting less efficiency in delivery of medical care. So therefore, if this was the original initial quantity and price, misapplication of antibiotics, overuse, will cause the supply or delivery of care to be less effective, and so therefore the quantity actually exchanged in real terms will shrink, and because of these health consequences or adverse health consequences, the price of what is delivered will be higher than otherwise. So again, establish the model, make some assumptions about the supply and demand elasticities, and then show whether the supply or demand or both are impacted, and arrive at the final conclusion, and that pretty much closes the need to answer this question. So, quick and simple. Question number 3. The article or the question reads, in the article below, increase in cases of obesity and diabetes has led producers of high concentration insulin Humulin U500 to increase prices dramatically or drastically. Humulin U-500 has some advantages over less concentrated U-100. Using economic models, discuss the logic and reasoning behind price hike for U500. So the product is U500 Humulin. This would be the price of U500. In the article, there is not much conversation about the production of the more concentrated variation, so there is no assumption to be made about the supply, production, or delivery of this product, so we make the generic supply curve. Now, the U500 turns out to be a lot more appropriate for certain group of people who do not respond to less concentrated variation, and so therefore if it works for them, the utility will increase. This is quantity of U500 consumed. This is total utility. The utility will enhance because of its efficacy, and so therefore the idea is that if you get more utility for the consumption of the same level of a product, your willingness to buy at every price, if this is what you would have bought, and if it's more effective, at every price you buy more. Okay. So the demand shifts to the right, and if you really get hooked on it, not only you buy more, but you lose price sensitivity. So the demand becomes more steep. So therefore, you start off again here with the demand curve. And as a result of efficacy of this potent or more concentrated variation, the demand will shift to the right and therefore become less price sensitive. This reduction in price sensitivity justifies or provides incentive for the seller, the manufacturer and distributor of the product, to jack up the price. Anytime the consumer becomes less price sensitive, they are essentially open to price hikes. And this is exactly what happened here and is happening to many other pharmaceuticals these days, as the suppliers are raising prices, knowing that either private insurance or Medicare and Medicaid will pay for it. And they've established here and there some kind of a subsidy program for those who scream about high prices and their lack of affordability, and give them some kind of price discount on case-by-case basis type of thing. So this wraps up the answer to question number 3. Question number 4. It reads, in the article below, workplace wellness programs to promote weight loss has not worked for many who have tried it. One explanation is that the incentives or subsidies are either insufficient or offered indirectly, and employees do not relate to the incentives to boost their demand for the program. Like you get some discount on your insurance at the end of the year, or some kind of rebate, or some few dollars incentive on your paycheck down the road, etc. And so people don't kind of get it, and so they're not sufficiently incentivized to join. Therefore, either payout should be considerably higher, or more direct and concurrent payment. so that the employees can see the benefits in a tangible way that they can relate to. So then the question asks, using economic theory, discuss the nature of workplace weight loss program failure. These weight loss programs, so the product is therefore quantity of weight loss, employer weight loss programs. This would be the price of weight loss programs. Now, to put these programs together is not a rocket science. You can essentially agree to offer it and maybe have some on-site facilities established. So it's manageable. So therefore, we will not make much assumption on the supply side. Now, on the employees' participation, the idea is to subsidize these opportunities, weight loss programs, by making them available or readily available, hoping that more employees will jump and be interested. So the assumption is that they will be price sensitive, and so by providing subsidy, making it more readily available to lower the price, then the expectation would have been to get a significant number of employees to participate. Okay, this is with subsidy. On the availability side, or you subsidize in the form of giving discounts on insurance and so forth and so on to the consumer, so that they would boost their demand for employer-run programs for health maintenance and weight loss and so forth. And the idea is that at the end you may end up somewhere here with even a bigger consumption of these services, except it's not happening. And the reason that it's not happening is that the price incentives, the subsidy on the supply side is there, obviously, but this shift in the demand is not taking place, primarily because at the level of these subsidies or incentives, they're insufficient. So if these subsidies are offered and are insufficient, the boost in demand is minimal. It's not causing price sensitivity to kick in, and so therefore, for this to happen, you need essentially a demand curve that is inelastic to become elastic, and so therefore cause bigger consumption of these services. So this is essentially what you need to talk about in order to analyze the question. And finally, question number 5. In the article below, junior doctors in UK plan to strike. Using economic models, discuss the implications for the national health system of the UK. So, what is the product? This is a quantity of services by the national health system in UK, and this would be the price of national health system services. The demand is there. They have a national insurance, so the demand price, it tends to be price inelastic. There is a supply curve, and to produce medical care services through the national health system, they obviously use junior physicians, and they are complaining that their work hours and pay is insufficient, and they're planning to go on strike, which means that, if you remember, we said quantity supplied of a product is a function of its price, availability of inputs technology, etc., etc. Here, one of the inputs that goes into the production of medical care services by the national health system is shrinking, is walking off the jaw. So therefore, the response is that the left shift in the supply curve as a result. So the end result, this was the original equilibrium and price. End result is there will be less services exchanged, and it will have to be price higher. Now, this price higher, you would say, well, if the national health system is free, how is it price higher? Well, very minimum wait time. That would not be in the form of a monetary hike in the price, but would be in discomfort with a condition, medical condition that has to be endured until they receive care. And so therefore there will be price increase, but in terms of not out of pocket, but in terms of outcomes and delaying access to care.